All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Wednesday, January 29th, right here on your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns on All In Horns. I'm Tanner Carlson. This is brought to you by Rogue Sports Network, and I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. Got a fun episode for the people today, and going to go over a little bit of football news that came out over the last 24 hours or so, and it involves Oklahoma. And then we'll take a majority of our look will be looking at the SEC basketball schedule over the last weekend, and then what is upcoming, where Texas falls on that, what the rest of the conference schedule looks like for Texas, what Texas needs to do to make a run at things after stacking back-to-back ranked wins over Mizzou and a 22-point comeback over Texas A&M. Where are we at now? And we're going to discuss some of those things for you as they actually prepare to take on Ole Miss tonight. Is that right? Yeah, Wednesday night.
Yeah.
They'll take on Ole Miss, and we'll give a final prediction as we take a little bit of a look at that game as well, and we'll give our final scores. But the revenge game for Chris Beard, and how much bad blood do you think there actually is, or do you think it was just the incident happened? It was what it was. Both parties knew they had to separate from one another, and it kind of just is what it is. Or do you think there is a revenge game factor for Chris Beard, even though he's the one that caused his undoing at Texas?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get in the mind of someone like that and how they feel from this. You have some of those statements that came from his lawyer during that time, but those aren't from Chris Beard. He hasn't really spoke very much that I've read about it. I don't know if it's bad blood or if it's I would feel like you would understand, right? If anything, if you're Chris Beard, you just feel thankful to have a job, I would think.
Yeah.
Coming out of the situation that happened at Texas. And so I doubt there's bad blood. If anything, Texas feels bad blood towards Chris Beard because you feel like he had the basketball program really trending in a direction of becoming kind of a powerhouse. I mean, because one thing you can say about Chris Beard, wherever he goes, he succeeds as a basketball coach. But if anything, I think there'd be some bad blood towards Chris Beard. I know I still feel some bad blood towards Chris Beard.
Some type of way. Yeah.
Yeah. And not a positive way towards him, and not in a way of, I wish he was still the head coach at Texas. I'm not one of those people. I completely support the decision Texas made in firing him. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because I haven't really seen any media questions about it out there. And I don't think anyone probably feels comfortable asking it because you're not going to get an answer from it.
Well, you might get punched in the face, but anyway,
yeah, choked.
Yeah, that you might get choked out. But no, I completely agree. Every sentiment that you made, it's valid and it's true. Because yeah, if the way I feel about it, and I can only speak for myself, is very similar to how you feel, is that Texas was gaining momentum as a program and building on something, stacking something, and improving each year. And, Rodney Terry was able to take Chris Beard's team to the Elite Eight. And so you can only imagine where Chris Beard would have this program now going into the SEC. And doing the things that you do off the court and away from the program matter. Absolutely, 100%. And it should. Just like any other job. If I did that at my job and they got wind of it, and they would probably dismiss me and fire me as well. And so I think that should stand. And there are a low minority of Texas fans that still say to this day, man, we didn't need to fire Chris Beard. No, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You don't want that hanging around your program. You don't want that type of influence leading boys to men within a program, within an athletic program. And so with all that said, yeah, that's how I feel about it. But yeah, it's a little somber. It's a little kind of just, it's more annoyingly frustrating than anything else. That the fact
Yeah.
of kind of how everything went down. So, but Jake,
Some
before we
resentment.
get
Some resentment, I think, from a lot of
yeah,
Texas fans, and maybe
yeah,
Chris Del Conte feels that way, but he's got his second chance, and I will say everyone deserves a second chance to a point. And so, well, if he stays out of trouble the rest of his life, then you wash your hands from it. But it's just it was disappointing with how it ended at Texas, and I do hope there's a little extra emphasis on this game for me, just as a fan of wanting Texas to win it.
yeah. Jake, when was the last time that a defensive coordinator for the number one defense in the country left his job for another opportunity within the same conference? Happened here over the last 24 to 48 hours in the college football world. Jim Knowles, the defense coordinator for Ohio State, leaving Ohio State and choosing Penn State over Oklahoma. Wasn't fired, wasn't anything, just had an opportunity. And not like he got promoted to head coach or anything like that. He's defensive coordinator, but will be doing his play calling duties at Penn State.
Well, yeah, and that's the key there, right? Is not getting promoted. It being a side move career wise, but obviously,
Is it a side
payment
move or is
wise,
it a downgrade?
I mean, it depends what you're talking. If you're talking about money, it is an upgrade. Apparently, the Ohio State offer did not come that close to what Penn State was offering. I believe Oklahoma offered the same thing, and he just chose Penn State over Oklahoma, which goes to show you where Oklahoma is at a program right now. Is it a upgrade as far as location? I mean, you could the best argument to me is stability wise, because Ohio State, if you don't win another national championship within 3 to 4 years, the good blood, if you will, on the opposite side of bad blood, goes away real quick.
Yeah.
With an Ohio State, your leash is shorter, I would say, at Ohio State after winning a national championship than it is just at Penn State to begin with. So there is stability there. But yeah, I mean, it's not an upgrade as far as program goes, and it is confusing to see that type of move. Money wise, he's now the top paid assistant coach in all of college football. I think it was 3.1 or 3.3 million.
I mean, that's more than a lot of head coaches at the college Division I level.
Yeah. And so you get it from that perspective, and Penn State does have talent. On the defensive side of the ball, they've obviously had.
Well, and he's only going to recruit better than what they've already been getting.
And obviously, if Penn State is dishing out that type of money for a coach, I would imagine that they are seeing their opportunity to win a national title as happening right now, which I think is the right way to approach it if you're Penn State. Sure. You're going to see, we talked about schools going all in from an NIL perspective. And Penn State is certainly in that range where I would think you're thinking about going, let's push all of our chips to the center. Because then if you win a national title, it kind of starts to fund itself to a point, especially with revenue sharing coming in. And so if you're Penn State, you just made it to a semifinal. You probably have donor support at an all-time high going, we just need that last push, right? We played the national championship champions this year, and we lost by one score. We lost by one score in the semifinal game, and we lost by one score to Oregon in the Big Ten title game. So you go, we're close. We're just still not quite there.
We're 3 possessions away.
Yeah. And so you bring in a Jim Knowles, you bring a little bit of a push in recruiting and from the NIL perspective, and all of a sudden you're playing for a national championship game.
Now, this is a Texas Longhorn podcast, so let's wrap it back around to the good guys. How important and how often have you and I talked about retaining staff, retaining players, and the crucialness of having success in those departments of building a program like Sark has at the University of Texas, and not getting guys like your defensive coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski, to get poached by a team within your conference. Maybe a Texas A&M wants to dish out, $3 million for a defensive coordinator. Maybe Oklahoma wants to dish out $3 million. Well, obviously they didn't because they couldn't because they don't have the money.
Well, they
But,
offered it. They offered him the same offer that Penn State did.
okay. I thought you said it
And
was
he
closer to
chose
the Ohio
Penn
State
State.
offer. Gotcha. But
It-
maybe they go that route. But the fact that Texas has been able to retain the coaching staff for the most part to keep it intact with a couple of positional moves here and there, which that's going to happen everywhere. But your main pieces staying intact, absolutely huge for building a program to where Texas has.
Yeah, and not only retaining, but when you do lose someone, getting who you want. And the best way to get someone you want other than just money is to have the culture that someone wants to coach at, which we don't know why Jim Knowles left Ohio State exactly. The wild thing is his girlfriend actually lives in Oklahoma, which was part of the reason that there was talk of him going to Oklahoma. So I really thought it was between Oklahoma, Ohio State. And then Penn State just came in and said, no, he's ours. And so when you do lose a coordinator or a positional coach, being able to get someone that you want, and that is option A versus option B. And when your program is in a really good spot, you're able to get, NFL coaches or really highly sought after college coaches. When Texas lost Bo Davis, you go out and get a Kenny Baker who's been coaching at the NFL level. You bring him in, he brings you a pipeline to Georgia. You don't get Justice Terry if you don't have Kenny Baker. And so being able to replace when you do lose coaches with really high-end talent on top of retaining. And that is an area where Oklahoma and Texas were reverse just about 4 to 5 years ago, where Oklahoma could get who they wanted. And now it's kind of, how the turntables. I think about Herman going into his last year as head coach. He couldn't get a defensive coordinator because no one wanted to go coach with a lame duck head coach.
Yeah.
And so he had to promote internally to, I believe it was Chris Ash, who then became defensive coordinator. He was like a defensive analyst or a positional coach, went to defensive coordinator because they couldn't hire from outside the program, at least any prominent names. And then Tom Herman was fired after that season.
Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. Could be echoing that at the University of Oklahoma with what we're seeing happening right now. They obviously went all in going after Jim Knowles and didn't get him.
Yeah, no, it's a big move, a head scratching move, but a big one nonetheless. And, maybe we start seeing this. We talk about transfer portal, we talk about NIL, and now these programs are willing to dish out large sums of money, not only to their players, but also their coaching staff to make sure that they get the guys that they want, especially if they feel like they are on the precipice of something special in terms of winning a national championship, like Penn State obviously feels like they have. Jake, let's flip the script and go to basketball.
Last point on it. How much is $3 million to a program like that for one, over 3 years, $3 million a year? $3 million isn't that much to these programs for 1 year.
Well, I mean, let's look at it in terms of the revenue that they just got from making the playoffs and getting to a semifinal. They probably made about $14 million on that run. That's about what Texas made. So I feel like Penn State probably had
it'd be the same.
Yeah.
They both lost in the semifinal.
Right. So they got about $14 million put towards their conference. Now they have to split that amongst their conference, but I mean, they still earn that. And that money.
When they're getting money from Ohio State winning too.
And they're getting money from Ohio State winning too. So with that all being said, you can probably afford to boost your budget a little bit and in terms of what your coaches are making on a salary basis. So but that's a great point to make, Jake. All right, in terms of basketball, let's take a look around the SEC. We will get into the Texas A&M game here shortly. We'll give a quick recap on that, but first, number 1 Auburn beats number 6 Tennessee 53-51, a great game. However, that game pushes number 6 Tennessee to 5th in the conference. I mean, it's an insanely deep conference. The number 6 team in the country is sitting, a little bit above midway in the conference standings. Florida continues to steamroll teams, beat Georgia by 30. They're number 3 in the conference. And Florida right now, maybe one of my favorites going into March as we approach the end of the season. I'm really liking what the Gators are doing. And then Vandy upsetting Kentucky at home 74-69. Vandy, a tournament team? Same conference record as Tennessee. And so those are just some of the headlines around the SEC. Jake, what do you want to hit on?
10 teams in the top 25 from the SEC.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt is ranked now. And so that brought the total to 10 teams right now, based off all the advanced metrics that the committee does look at. We talk about those quadrant 1 wins, which Texas has gotten 2 in their last 2 games, being such a big deal. Well, right now there would be 13 teams from the SEC into the NCAA tournament, which is unbelievable. Because again, so many clips out there from us that sound so stupid now of talking about how going, was an upgrade in football, upgrade in baseball, but a big downgrade in basketball. And that has just not been the case. To be fair, this is a complete flip of what it has been. The Big 12 is still strong in basketball, but not near what it has been. And then the SEC is on a different level than we've even seen the Big 12 be, at least from rankings wise and non-conference wise.
Oddly enough, it looks like it might be back to the Big 10 and the SEC making the biggest runs into the tournament. The ACC looking kind of meh. They really only have Duke going their way. And then outside of that, who really knows? And then the Big 12, also a good conference. Iowa State is a very good team. Kansas laying a little bit of an egg in that overtime game.
Unbelievable game. If you haven't watched the highlights of that game, not just you, but people watching, go watch it.
Yeah, it was a great game, but probably should have won that game. And then in regulation before letting it go to overtime. But then Houston is Houston, and they have always been Houston, and they're the same team that they have been over the last, 5 years under under that coaching tenure. And so the Big 12 will have a couple teams make a run, but the SEC and the Big 10, they look like, you got teams like Wisconsin starting to make some runs and make some noise in the Big 10.
Yeah, those definitely look like they're, of course, got some type of commotion going on.
That was
there.
My dog. Sorry about that. Yeah. I touched her butt while she was in her bowl and then flipped the freak out. So sorry.
The Big East is another conference that always comes to mind. Come tournament time. Of course, you get those northern schools that come out of nowhere, but
UConn, Villanova.
St. John's really good this year. Marquette, UConn's still going to be in the mix, even though they're a little down especially compared to where they've been. But it's going to be interesting to see tournament time, because sometimes these super conferences kind of beat themselves up and flame out the tournament. The Big 12 would do that, other than a couple teams. But the SEC, the thing about them this year is how dominant they were at a conference.
Yeah.
Against a lot of these top, in college basketball, you do get top teams playing each other all the time, because I'd say strength of schedule is very highly rewarded by the committee in basketball. And so it was like almost every SEC team had lost at most 1 to 2 games heading into conference play, with a ton of ranked wins. Oklahoma beat a ton of ranked teams. Yeah. They can't buy a win in the SEC. And so it's going to be, it's going to be a fun year to be covering March. Granted, I think it's always a fun year to cover March Madness. But
March is always a great time of year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to kind of see how things play out, because with the Big 12 not being as dominant, the SEC having so many teams that are likely going to make the tournament, and then you still have, those conferences like the Big East hanging around. But the Big 10 looks really good. Michigan State looks like they're kind of back to where you expect them to be. And then, of course, you're always going to have upsets. So it's going to be fun.
Jake, it might be a busy month for you and I, because it might just be immediate reactions after day 1, after day 2 of the tournament, after day 3, going Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That might be what our March schedule looks like, because you and I, we're going to want to cover the games the moment they happen, not just the games, but the entire day, the slate of games. So we might be recording late, we might be recording often. But it's fun. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, the first weekend, the first like weekend of March Madness is one of my favorite sports
weekends
moments, or weekends, stretch of days of the entire year out of all sports.
That Thursday through Sunday, that first 4 days of the tournament, there's nothing better in maybe all of sports.
No, and it is what makes March Madness. All the following weeks are fun, but nothing beats that first Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
That is just premier, arguably the top sports stretch of the entire year.
I agree. Jake, also within that SEC, those headlines that I gave earlier, number 22 Mizzou beat number 16 Ole Miss, giving Ole Miss their third loss in a row in conference play. Their last win, coincidentally, coming against Alabama, of all teams. I'm not sure how they did that, but they dropped games against A&M, dropped games against Mizzou, two teams that Texas has beaten back-to-back. So curious to see where these two teams are lining up, where Ole Miss might be kind of on a trajectory down, and Texas's stock might be rising up just slightly. But after that Texas A&M game and Texas Aggs brought on Tom Hart, a broadcaster during the Texas A&M game, to discuss how he was so mean and unfair to Texas A&M.
The jokes write themselves. That's because this wasn't done ironically. The A&M fan base has been up in arms over, he called us little brother. He brought up the football game that we lost. He said that the A&M players wanted to go to Texas, and just crying on social media, to the point where TexAgs, which is the biggest A&M, insider group or whatever you want to call it, that covers recruiting, covers all the games, covers all the sports, brings him on and basically interrogates him over, why were you so mean to us? And this is the same fan base that says Texas fans are soft when a coach says something about horns down and Rodney Terry. The fans got mad at Rodney Terry after that. Meanwhile, you have them crying. I mean, just legitimately crying about a broadcaster bringing up a football game you lost in the first year the rivalry's been played, and over a decade. Maybe the joke is your football team and not the broadcaster just talking about it. If it makes you upset or it makes others laugh, maybe it's just you that's the joke.
Maybe let's take a look in the mirror in that instance and really see who's at fault and who's to blame for those types of comments to be made. And yes, I'm a Texas fan, so I guess maybe I have rose-colored glasses on or whatever. I didn't even notice any of that. I was too busy worried if Texas was actually going to make the comeback or not. So I mean, there was no recollection in my brain of him even making those comments. I don't even remember those comments being made. So when you sent it to me, I was like, what are you even talking? I was so solely focused on the comeback that I wasn't even listening to the broadcast.
I remember him talking about like the A&M players wanting to go to Texas, but to me, I was just like, well, yeah.
Duh.
Well, duh.
Yeah.
And then he brought up the football game, and it's like, well, yeah, that's pretty normal to bring up. Like this, the first year they played again in all these sports.
They
Texas
do that all
won the
time.
football game. It'd be like me crying. They brought up that Texas lost to them a month ago. Yeah. And I loved A&M fans going, well, they just lost by 20. Well, this is the best basketball team you've ever had. But I mean, it is. You've never made it to the Elite Eight ever as a program.
Yeah.
This is your best chance to do it ever in your program's history. And you lost to a Texas team that has most people calling for the head coach's job. I mean, the fact that you didn't sweep Texas this year is a incredible failure, but that is what Aggies do best.
It is totally on brand. So, Jake, lastly, before we close out the show, let's talk about this Texas Ole Miss game. Coming off of back-to-back wins over ranked opponents, Mizzou and Texas A&M. They take on Ole Miss on the road. Ole Miss has lost 3 straight after beating Alabama and just lost back-to-back games to A&M and Mizzou, coincidentally enough. I believe this is a must-win for both programs. Kind of where these two teams are lined up at and the stretch of games Texas has coming ahead of them following this game. I don't think this makes or breaks Texas' season, but man, to stack 3 straight ranked wins back-to-back heading into a couple of games where you should now be favored in those games in Texas before you hit the hardest stretch of your season come mid-February. I think this is a great opportunity for the men's program to kind of elevate themselves within the conference.
I think this is a great opportunity to really start to solidify your team as a tournament team. I don't think I wouldn't put must win. I'd say must wins are LSU, Arkansas. I mean, your next 2 games. To me, any game where you're playing an unranked SEC team is a must win.
I think if you're fighting back 2 games below 500 within the conference with the stretch of games you have coming up, I think it's almost like a NBA playoff series. Boy, 2-2 looks a lot better than 3-1.
Yeah, but you have 2 games you should win after this without a doubt, and that would get you back to 500 even if you lose it. Then you have a couple tough ones, but then the schedule kind of lightens up to end. You still have a couple tough ones after that, but I'd say after Alabama, Kentucky, the schedule is about as light as it can be right now in this conference.
Yeah.
So to me, this is a game where if they win this, I'm going to be pretty confident that they will make the tournament. I'm hesitant to say they're in the tournament if they win this, just because I think this team is capable of beating most teams, but I also think they're capable of losing to any team.
And I still think you would need a couple games in the SEC tournament to go your way. I would appreciate that. I think it would help.
I would appreciate that, but I think if you're at 500 or almost 500 in SEC play in this year, you're in the tournament. We're going to see several teams get in that have a losing record in conference play. So if you get 7 wins in conference, 8 wins, you're in. And Texas is, with the schedule they have left, they already should get to that. Beating Ole Miss should essentially guarantee it. But again, this team is capable of beating just about anyone if they play to their top level for 2 halves. There's the key there. But they're also capable of losing into anyone. I'm really interested to see when Weaver and Kaluma are going to come back, because I do think when they come back, if you continue to kind of integrate the things we saw in the second half against A&M, that's where this team could really actually hit another gear and hit a next level that we maybe not necessarily have seen yet, other than in that second half against A&M.
Jake, Texas is averaging 78 points per game. Ole Miss 77 points against, 66 both each teams. Texas is shooting at 48% from the field. Ole Miss 44%. Texas getting about 35 rebounds a game. Ole Miss 34 rebounds a game. Texas 13 assists to Ole Miss's 15.5 assists per game. Blocks dead even at 4.6 blocks per game. Steals, Texas on the lower end at about just under 7 steals per game. Ole Miss a little over 10 steals a game. Completely evenly matched in terms of statistically what these two teams have done up to this point in the season. I do think it's going to come down to, ironically enough, after all my complaining all year long on the Texas offense and how Coach Rodney Terry runs this offense, I do think this game particularly is going to come down to the individual play of a Trey Johnson or a Tremont Mark or what have you. There's going to have to be a couple of guys that step up and make a couple of plays individually that are going to have to elevate the team over this Ole Miss game.
Yeah, and this is my call for this game. Is I think this is the Tremont Mark game where he's going to build off the momentum of hitting that buzzer beater against A&M. And we've seen just about every, highly touted Texas player have their moment in the spotlight this season. Mark is just now kind of starting to gel with the roster, and we started to see that against A&M. I think this is a game where he goes for 20 plus points and kind of leads the way. And I've picked Texas to lose a lot and almost feel like I should pick them to lose here just to keep that mojo kind of going. But I'm going to take Texas to win this game. I don't know if you wanted me to give prediction yet, but I'm doing it. I'm going to go right at what they average, 78-77 Texas. I think it probably will be a little bit lower scoring than that, maybe more like a 71-70 type game. But I think Ole Miss, them losing games almost plays more into their hands. But I look at their, who they beat this year, kind of look at their schedule and how it's laid out. And I think Texas, as long as they can just play a solid game, they should be able to win this. And they've been playing better basketball. They've been improving. And if they can continue to just slowly, 2 steps forward, 1 back, but you're still going forward at the end of the day, this is a game that they should win.
61-60 is my final. Texas Longhorns winning this one. Oddly enough, we both chose 1-score games, but I just think that it is going to be a close game. I think there's going to be stretches of basketball that are going to be almost unbearable to watch on both sides, just very sloppy. There's going to be stretches of it, but I also think you're going to see some really good competitive defensive basketball. Coach Beard obviously emphasizes defense, slower paced basketball. Rodney Terry is a limb off of his coaching tree. And so the apple doesn't fall far from it when it comes to that. And so I think both of these philosophies of coaches are similar enough to where we might see a lower scoring game. There's going to be some sloppiness, but we're also going to see a very hard fought competitive basketball game between two teams. And I think that's what we're going to get.
Yeah. And this would be, so, you've had the 2 big wins in a row for Texas basketball, both at home. This is kind of your chance to get that first quadrant 1 victory on the road. And if you have that on top of some of the games that Texas has won most recently, because don't forget, Oklahoma is a quadrant 1 win too on the road, but now you'd have a ranked win on the road. It really starts to bolster this resume to where, you're just 3-4 games away, wins away from being pretty much locked as a tournament team. And despite all the negativity that both of us have had towards this team at times, the goal, I still want to see Texas play in March. There should never be a season where we don't see them play in March. And
I love March Madness too much to not want my team to be in there.
And, Rodney Terry's won a game every time he's made it. And I don't take that for granted because let's not forget, it was 10 years between tournament wins for Texas until that Elite 8 season.
You're not wrong.
So if you get in the tournament, you get hot, they have the talent to do it. Just like a year where it was so magical during the regular season with Kevin Durant, and then it came crashing down in the tournament. You can have a season where there's ups and downs and it's a little bit miserable at times, but then that talent gets hot when you hit the tournament and you make a deeper run than you could have ever expected.
I have a question for you. If they are a, 7-10? Yeah, 7-10 play-in game, technically the first round. Is that a tournament win?
No.
I don't consider it a tournament win.
No.
Yeah. If you're a 10 seed and you beat a 7 seed or a 10-10, I guess it's a 10-10 to play a set or whatever it is. I don't consider that a tournament win either.
No,
a tournament win is getting to the round of 34.
It's a play-in win. If anything, what I will say is if you go to the Sweet 16 and you play to play-in, you go, damn, this team's really hot.
Yeah.
Like that feels, it adds a little oomph on a deeper run. Yeah, exactly. It just adds a little bit of extra feeling. But if you just win that and then lose your first round game.
Didn't UCLA, they lost the national championship or won the national championship.
I think we've had a national champion play in the play-in.
I think at UCLA, when they played Gonzaga or Baylor that year, did they lose it or Final Four?
I'd have to go back.
I had to go back.
Maybe that's something we do when we get closer to March of looking at what teams have made runs. But I'm pretty sure we've had a play-in team either win or make it.
That's a whole nother discussion. We can get closer to March. Is it a Cinderella run if a UConn or a UCLA or a North Carolina, who's a 8 seed or lower, makes a run to the Final Four? That's a conversation for another day. Don't give away your answer quite yet. But
should they even be in the tournament
should
if
they
they're going to
even
be that
in
low
a
of a
tournament
seed?
if you're getting the number 1 through 5 top recruiting classes in the country and you're a 10 seed or qualify to be a 10 seed, you should probably just be on the last 4 out. And that's my own opinion. But anyway, conversation for another day. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for all the support out there. We appreciate it. We love it. 5 days a week, dropping at noon. You can subscribe to us where all podcasts are heard. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and watch us each and every day. But don't forget your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson. As always, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.